Hey everyone, it's Phil. How are you? And Mary is here with us as well. We'll give it another couple minutes, let everybody sign on, and we'll get going shortly. Let me, hey everyone, thank you. Hey Shelley, how's everyone doing? Thank you for being here. Jill Chen, thank you. Wendy. Hey Patty, thank you. All right, looks like a few more people signing on. We'll get going in just a moment. Let me share my screen. I'm going to ask everyone, thank you for saying hello. Once we kind of start the presentation, if you can kind of hold off on the questions, the chat. I know, for the people listening, it sometimes can be distracting when those questions are coming through. So we're going to shut the chat off. We will definitely have time for questions and answers in the end. So let me get going. So Mary, if you could shut off the chat, that would be great. All right. So just a little background. I know probably some of you have taken the trainings before, may know this, but if you're kind of new, or maybe haven't really been paying much attention, just a little background. So about a year ago, 10 months ago, the first kind of shoe to drop in all this was a MLS in Massachusetts called MLS PIN. And this had to do with the mandatory offer of compensation. So previously, even if it was $1, something had to go into the MLS in terms of what the seller was offering to the buyer's agent. Could be as little as $1, it could be certainly more. The Justice Department took exception to that. And basically that was kind of the beginning. So that mandatory requirement that the seller offer buyer agent commission went away. And then, we've all seen where now potentially, the seller doesn't have to offer anything, to the buyer's agent. That is feasible, probably not advisable given the market we're in. So that's where that came from. And then there had been a lawsuit that had probably been filed in 2019, so a number of years ago, that basically accused NAR, Remax, Caldwell Banker, which is now Anytime Realty, Keller Williams, Berkshire Hathaway, for, anti-competitive behavior, collusion, and in September, Remax and Anytime Realty, Caldwell Banker, Sotheby's, they settled for some fairly large amounts, 55 million and 83 million. That was kind of, again, the beginning where we saw like, hey, seems like NAR, doesn't really, have much to stand on. Then it went to a jury trial in Missouri, and NAR, Keller Williams, Berkshire Hathaway, they lost, and the jury awarded 1.87 with a B billion to the plaintiffs. NAR at that time says we're going to defend on, we're going to fight this. And then in March 15th of this year, NAR settles. And basically the settlement, while, somewhat disruptive, I'm not going to admit it hasn't been or it won't be. It is much, much better than what could have happened. And I'm going to talk about that for a moment. So again, and this really speaks to everybody, as an agent in the field, really being compliant, right? Being compliant so that, this is the end of it, right? And this doesn't, because the Justice Department is still looking. And if they say, hey, all that was done was really just nothing, they're going to be back. And if they come back, so here's what really could be bad. Seller can't pay the buyer agent anything ever. It's illegal to do that. That's what they want in the end, right? But that's not what was agreed to. So this is somewhere in between, while, potentially disruptive in the way we have to do business, some additional forms, right? Not nearly as bad and, you know, um, as it could have been, right? So again, we want to adhere to this. We want to be part of this, and then hopefully this is, the end of it and we can get on and do our business. So the settlement agreement calls for by August 17th, full implementation. And we're going to go through not only the buyer broker agreement, but also just, kind of what these changes are overall. So again, August 17th is the drop dead date. There are many MLSs, throughout Florida. Each MLS is treating this slightly differently, right? So depending on the MLS you're part of, like for instance, I know down in Fort Myers, Naples. That MLS is taking out the commission, the buyer broker commission data August 1st. Stellar MLS, which is the biggest MLS in Florida, it's coming out August 6th. But by August 17th, it will be out of every single MLS, right? So the dates are going to vary basically from August 1st to August 17th. So depending on when your MLS takes out that commission data, that buyer broker commission data, when those fields are removed from the MLS, that's when you have to implement the changes we are going to talk about. All right. So again, what are some of the changes? So basically, it's really three things. It's the listing agreement, it's the buyer broker agreements. I'm going to call them agreements because, interesting enough, today, the Florida Realtors came out with what's called a property pre-touring agreement. We're going to talk about that. So that's a less, it's a one pager, probably easier to get that buyer to sign than that 4-page buyer broker agreement, right? So it's a lesser, easier to sign, easier to explain. We're going to talk about that. And then the other, buyer broker agreement is a showing agreement, right? The showing agreement has always been out there, but it hasn't been modified and finalized yet. Probably coming in the next few days, but not out there, not out there yet. So those are kind of the buyer broker agreements. So we have the buyer broker agreement, the property pre-touring agreement, and the showing agreement. All right. And then in addition to those new documents, we have a seller compensation agreement, right? So so that, so if you think about this now, right, because the data is no longer in the MLS, you are, as a buyer's agent, you are going to need to have either the seller, think of it like when it was a FSBO, like if you had a FSBO, right, you're pitching that FSBO to, bring your buyer by, you got a commission agreement from them, right? So that is what guaranteed you that you received compensation as the buyer agent. So now we have a compensation agreement. So the seller can still sign that, just like they did with the FSBO, but also the brokerage can sign it, right? And that's what you're going to need as a buyer's agent to be assured that you are going to get paid, right? You're going to need that either, from the seller saying they are going to pay you directly or from the listing brokerage. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but I'm going to mention it now. So if you're a listing agent, right? You're a listing agent and you have, showings, buyers, they're going to be asking you, hey, is your seller offering compensation? So what you can send them, right? And you're going to fill out that form. It's in .loop and get it to us. You can, get it to us now. We'll sign that, or I'll sign that. And basically it tells what we are going to pay, right? So if the listing agreement will just use 5%, 5% in total, 2.5%, to the buyer broker, right? You're going to get that, commission agreement signed by Dalton Wade, and then you're gonna, give that to the buyer's agent, and then their brokerage is going to sign it. And then, we have a contract that we are going to pay them. If you're the buyer's agent, that is what you're going to need to make sure you get paid. All right. So again, the removal of the co-bro compensation on MLS, no later than August 17th. But as I mentioned, some MLSs are going to take it out sooner. But as we said, sellers are still going to be able to offer compensation to buyer's agent. That is not changing, and this market is strongly advised, right? I mean, you want to do everything possible as a seller, to motivate those buyer's agents to bring their clients by. There's the potential for third-party websites, right? I've heard that Caldwell Banker has a site where, their co-broke data will be displayed. Dalton Wade is working on that. We're not quite there yet and ready to release that, but, there will be ways potentially where, you don't have to call the listing agent. It'll be out there kind of in the public domain. It just can't be on the MLS. And again, if you're the listing agent, there can be no mention anywhere in MLS, not in the public remarks, not in the realtor remarks, nowhere about what is being offered to that, buyer agent, right? One other quick thing, there is also, MLS, many of them will have what is called a concession field, right, where the seller is offering a concession to the buyer, right? Can be a percent, can be a dollar amount. That concession amount, right? Again, sometimes we would see it in the public remarks, the realtor remarks, but there actually is going to be a new field, and it's going to be yes or no. Is the seller offering a concession? If it's yes, I believe you're able to put in the amount. And again, your buyer can use that concession to pay your commission. Now, again, when you write that up, right, in the contract, typically, what do we say? Seller to pay $10,000 of buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and non-allowables, right? We cannot specifically say $10,000 to pay buyer broker commission. That is not permitted, right? So again, we can be general, and then that buyer can allocate part of or all of that, concession to pay the buyer agent commission, right? And again, once that data is removed from the MLS, you're going to need to negotiate directly, with the listing agent or seller to see if the seller is offering compensation. And then you are going to get that, commission agreement. Think like it was commercial, right? Commercial, there's no co-broke, often, right? So if you want the seller to pay, you got to get a commission agreement. Same now, right? Is how that is going to work. So again, just a suggestion, you don't want to be you're taking somebody out, showing them 5 or 6 properties. You don't want to be calling 5 or 6 times, finding out what the commission is, right? If your client is interested, call, find out. Hopefully the listing agent, is on top of their game, and they already have that commission agreement signed by their brokerage, and they send it over to you. And then you have Dalton Wade sign it, and you're covered, right? So, so again, and then as soon as that, like right now, we're still in this kind of, transition period where you don't need that, right? You don't need it, as long as that commission data is still in the MLS, you don't need a commission agreement. But as soon as it's removed, right, you are going to need it, because then you are not guaranteed of getting paid as a buyer broker without it. The commission agreement meaning to sign by, the broker and the listing brokerage or seller. And then obviously you're going to need a signed buyer broker property pre-touring or showing agreement once the data has been removed, right? So again, every single showing, not every showing, once you have the agreement, you're good to show multiple properties, but you cannot be showing anybody any properties once that commission data is removed without, without one of those signed agreements. Let me say what they are again. The buyer broker agreement, that is the most um, aggressive, has the most data, right? The property pre-touring agreement, a little tamer, maybe easier to get signed. And then certainly the showing agreement, has kind of the least amount of, teeth, or might make that buyer, not uncomfortable at all. And then again, if you're under agreement prior to the removal of the co-broke data, you're all good, right? You won't need the commission agreement or a buyer broker agreement. All right, let's talk a little bit more, about that property, pre-touring, the buyer broker, and the showing agreement. So again, the form should, give the real estate professional and consumer the ability to kind of memorialize the relationship, based on transparent and clear conversations when deciding to work together, right? Some mandatory provisions. Um, the amount of compensation must be, objectively ascertainable. Right. I had a call from an agent today, and again, she was referencing the accredited, buyer, information, right? I believe it's ABR, right? And there it talks about a range that is not permitted, right? There it is like 2%, 3%, $5,000. It is very straightforward. And again, the other thing is you cannot, I mean, you take a chance, right? Again, putting like pay me like in the contract, right? In the purchase contract, pay me 2.5%, or the contract is not valid. That is an ethics violation. You can't do that, right? So you got to get that, commission agreement signed, right? On top of it, listing agents are going to have it just like we talked about. And then, they're going to send it to you. You're going to send it to me. I'm going to sign it, and we have an agreement. And then you're going to put your offer in, right? And then hopefully, it gets accepted and off you go, right? All right. So, and then again, on these agreements, there's a statement on all of them that said you're not able to receive compensation from any source that exceeds the amount or rate agreed to with the buyer, right? I mean, this is one of the ones that seems to kind of irk buyers agents, right? Hey, I only got somebody to agree to 2%, but then they're offering 3%. Unfortunately, you only get 2%. Now, again, you could ask your buyer to modify it to sign a modification, increasing the commission you receive to 3%, but you have to have that. And then again, bonuses, they're out. There are no more, right? And again, potentially can, have it modified, but without that, all you're able to receive is, what you've agreed to. Now, here's another one to think about, as the listing agent, right? So as the listing agent, you got 5%, we'll use that, 2.5 for your side, 2.5 you're offering to the buyer's agent. But then now the buyer's broker agreement only calls for 2%. Right. So you have to speak to your client and ask them, hey, are you still willing to pay 5%? And then you're going to have to do a modification of the listing agreement stating now that, the buyer agent only receives 2%. Maybe they don't want to do that. Maybe they just want to pay you the 2.5%, right? And then they're going to only give 2% to the buyer's agent. So the seller saved a half a point. So that's how that's going to work. All right, just some other things to think about. When you enter into the buyer broker agreement, obviously it's written. There's going to be a statement that commissions are negotiable. What type of agreement are you entering into? Single agent, transaction broker, right? So again, you're going to have to think through that. Dalton Wade, we're going to allow, whatever you guys think is best for your business and how you're going to promote this to your buyers. we're good with that, right? So, and again, as you're getting them to sign that buyer broker agreement, you're going to really discuss with them that, you're going to work very hard to get the seller to pay the co-bro commission so that the buyer doesn't have to come out of pocket, right? So again, we talked about this. As soon as the buyer broker compensation fields are removed, right, you're going to need that buyer broker agreement, property pre-touring, or showing agreement for any and all your showings. Again, you only need one. You don't need multiple ones for, say you're showing five properties. You don't need five different agreements. One agreement covers them all. All right, so I'm gonna let Mary take over and kind of take us. We're gonna start with the property pre-touring agreement. As I've mentioned, that just came out either last night or today. Thank goodness, it was timely for us, in doing this webinar. All right, Mary, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil. All right. So the property pre-touring agreement. So you will need to use this form before starting to show property to a potential client. In the first blank, you're going to write Dalton Wade, Inc. In the second two blanks, you're going to write your client's names. In the third blank, you're going to write the number of days you'll be contracted by these consumers to view property with them. The broker's compensation is next. So if these clients decide to submit an offer on a property you showed them, they will owe you compensation, and you're going to check all that apply. So option one, you're going to fill in the blank with a flat fee dollar amount, which will be due at the time of closing.
Can I just jump in for 1 second?
Yep.
Potentially they're gonna owe, right? But if the seller is actually paying the compensation, then they would owe nothing.
Yep. Option two, you're going to fill in a percentage of the purchase price plus any other amount which would be due at closing. And then option three, if there's any other arrangement, you can write it right here. Your compensation may be reduced if a seller or listing broker agrees to pay you some or all of the above listed commission. And we have an important note that the broker compensation will never exceed the amount agreed upon between you and the client here.
Right. Same thing I talked about again, like the maximum you can receive is what you've agreed to with that buyer. All right. So that very simple one pager, probably easier to get signed, right? All right. So let's move on to the buyer brokerage agreement now, a little bit more involved.
Perfect. Okay, so page one. Section one are the parties. So you're going to write your client's full name in the first blank space and then your name in the second blank space. Section two covers the term. So in the first and second blanks, you're going to enter the day, month, and year of the start of this agreement. And in the next two blanks, you're going to enter the ending date for this agreement. So if the buyer finds a property during this agreement, it will be extended until that transaction closes. Section three covers the property. So A, you're going to describe the type of property your client is looking for. And in B, you're going to write the location your client is interested in living. Section four goes over the broker's obligations. So as the broker, you must use your professional skills to help your client locate and view properties that match their search criteria, schedule showings, and fulfill the requirements of any subsequent transaction. Your client must understand that you might work with other buyers who are interested in the same properties that they're looking at. If you submit offers on the same home for more than one client, you must notify them that a competing offer was submitted, but disclose no other details unless given written consent. The client must understand that if you are compensated by a seller or a seller's agent, that does not mean that your duties to them are compromised in any way. C is fair housing. So as the broker, you will follow the principles of the Fair Housing Act. And D, services provided. So the broker cannot guarantee any of the services provided by anyone recommended to the consumer in connection with a property they're interested in. And then number 5 is the consumer obligations. So the client agrees to cooperate with you in accomplishing these goals. They're going to refer all inquiries and communications from other brokers and consumers related to their property searches to you as their broker. All negotiations and communication efforts for this property search must be made through you, and providing their broker, lender, closing agent, with accurate information to acquire a property. They must also authorize a credit check to be run on them to verify their buying potential. They must meet with you at reasonable times for property viewings and indemnify you from all losses, damages, and costs of any kind that could occur while you're acting on their behalf to find a property. All right, next page. Perfect. So they will make good faith effort to meet the terms of a purchase agreement or contract to lease when a property is found. And then number 6, we have the retainer. So in this blank, you can write the non-refundable retainer fee that the client will pay you upon execution of the contract. And this will be in addition to any commission earned by the broker.
Now, when Mary mentioned pay you, it is always paid to Dalton Wade. You guys are never really able to accept any funds ever. So just wanted to kind of clarify that.
And then section 7 covers the compensation. So compensation is earned when a property meeting the requirements of the client is found and a contract is entered to acquire the property. The commission received by the broker from the transaction to purchase a property can reduce the amount owed by the client as laid out here. So A, purchase or exchange. So enter here either a dollar amount or percentage of the purchase price, which will be owed to you once your client finds and purchases a property or leases a property. And C, the same applies to an option to purchase or option to lease. Compensation will be owed for all other types of property acquisitions, purchases, or exchanges. And then under E, you can list any additional fees that might exist there. 8 covers the protection period. So if within a certain amount of days, which you would write here, after the termination of this contract, your client enters into a purchase contract on a property you found for them during the time of this contract. So they would still owe you a commission. The default is going to be 30 days. So if it's something different you guys agree upon, please enter that there. And number 9 is conditional termination. So the broker can conditionally terminate this contract if requested. Enter the blank for any agreed upon cancellation fee that would apply under this circumstance. 10 covers dispute resolution. So mediation must first be attempted to solve any disputes that might arise out of this agreement. If litigation ensues, the prevailing party can recover their attorney's fees and costs from the other party unless both parties agree to neutral and binding arbitration. And if so, you're going to want to have everybody initial. Under arbitration, both parties will pay their own attorney's fees and will split the arbitrator's fees equally.
So
And
hold on, this does give the agreement a lot more teeth than previously what was there because they did not have this dispute resolution section. So if you ever had to kind of go after the buyer, the cost to do that often exceeded the commission. So this gives it a little more teeth. So that's a good thing.
And then section 11 is assignment persons bound. So the broker can assign this agreement to another broker and the agreement will bind the broker and the clients, their successors, personal representatives, and assignees.
So I know no one would ever leave Dalton Wade, but in in the very small chance that ever happens, and we have this buyer broker agreement, we would then need to assign that to your new brokerage so you could continue on. And then same, if you're coming to Dalton Wade, we do open up this training to, non-Dalton Wade agents. So again, if you're coming, and you have buyer broker agreements, you are going to need to assign them to Dalton Wade.
All right, perfect. So this brokerage relationship is transaction broker. So the first 2 pages of all the buyer broker agreements are basically the same. So the third pages are going to be what's different. So under this one, the broker is a transaction broker and they must perform these duties: deal honestly and fairly, account for all funds, use skill, care, and diligence in the transaction, disclose all known facts that materially affect the value of residential property, which are not readily observable, present all offers and counter offers in a timely manner, and has limited confidentiality with the buyer. We have other terms. So we advise that this section be left blank, but you can always consult your managing broker or lawyer on some verbiage to use here. We have number 14, which is acknowledgements and modifications. So the client or consumer understands that this agreement and all its content changes can only be made by writing and signed and agreed upon by both parties. And an important note is that brokerage fees are negotiable, and the broker cannot receive compensation that exceeds the amount agreed upon with their client. We also have here page 3 of the single agency agreement. So the main difference here is going to be number 12, the brokerage relationship. So under single agency, the broker and their associates owe the duties detailed here. A single agent is defined by Florida statutes as a broker who represents either the buyer or seller of real estate, but not both at the same time in the same transaction. So it's the highest form of representation, providing the most confidence to the consumer that the realtor represents only their interest. A transaction broker is defined as a broker who provides limited representation to a buyer or seller in a real estate transaction, but does not represent either in a fiduciary capacity. So the main difference here between the two is that a transaction broker relationship lacks these 4 things where single agency has them. And that's going to be loyalty, confidentiality, obedience, and full disclosure.
So one quick thing on confidentiality. So even as a transaction broker, you still have limited confidentiality with a buyer. So if a buyer said, hey, I want to submit an offer at 450, but I'm willing to go up to 475, and Phil's the listing agent, you send in that offer, and I call you up and say, hey, thank you for submitting that offer. It's Friday afternoon. Let's wrap this up. Let's get this done. What's your client willing to pay? And I start like hammering you. You can't tell them. Right? You can't tell them, oh, like, I'm not sure. Like, do you have a counter? So that is, can't be spilling the beans.
And an important note here is if you are a single agent and your client is interested in a Dalton Wade listing, you need to have that transition to transaction broker at the time of showing. All right, and then we also have here page 3 of the transition to transaction broker agreement. So this contract should be used if you and your client agree that you may represent both parties to a transaction and would then be transitioning from a single agency relationship to a transaction broker relationship. So under this type of representation, there is limited confidentiality, which prevents you as the real estate agent from disclosing to the buyer that the seller will accept a price less than asking, and from disclosing to the seller that the buyer will pay a greater price than what's been submitted in their offer. Essentially, nothing can be disclosed to either party unless otherwise agreed upon in writing. Under this agreement, the buyer and seller are giving up their rights to undivided loyalty from the broker. So the broker is simply going to be a facilitator of the transaction and will not represent one party to the detriment of the other.
So if you're a single agent, you've signed a single agent listing agreement and a Dalton Wade agent shows it, you have to transition to transaction broker. If you are a buyer's agent and you've signed that single agent buyer broker agreement and it's a Dalton Wade listing, you have to transition to transaction broker. Transaction broker is what allows us to have both sides of the transaction, either you as the listing agent having the buyer as well, or 2 Dalton Wade agents.
And then we also have here the Florida compensation agreements. So this is what you're going to get signed if the seller is paying a commission to the buyer's broker. Pretty straightforward.
So again, this is important to make sure you as the buyer's agent, get paid, right? So this can be, either from the seller directly or from the listing brokerage. And then if you're the listing agent, right, buyer's agents are going to ask you for this. So you want to have that in advance. If your client is offering, a commission, so you can just send it right over to them. They have it, it's all signed, and we're all good. All right, so let's talk of, thank you, Mary. Let's talk a little bit about kind of the key dates going forward. Um, the Florida Realtors has put out, the buyer broker agreement, the property pre-touring agreement, the commission agreements. Those are all done. Those are all in dot loop now. What they haven't done and are coming soon would be the new listing agreement. I don't see really much changing on the listing agreement, except stating that commissions are negotiable, and then they are revising that showing agreement. So those will be coming forth very shortly. And then again, as we mentioned previously, sometime between August 1st and August 17th, depending on your MLS, that buyer broker data is going to be removed. Once that is removed, that is what will trigger, if you're working as a buyer's agent, either the buyer broker agreement, the property pre-touring, or the showing agreement. And then also you are going to need the compensation agreement, with the seller or the seller's brokerage, to make sure you get compensated. All right, so compliance. Let's talk a little bit about that. Nobody likes compliance, but it is a necessary evil of our business, and we do need to be compliant. So NAR, right? NAR is going to be scrutinized over this, and they are going to be scrutinizing the various MLSs, and the MLSs are the ones that are going to, be ensuring compliance, right? So it is possible, and I know it will happen, that you as an agent could, and they are going to request it from you, the buyer broker agreement, the pre-touring agreement, or the showing agreement. If you don't have one, if you are not adhering to this, if you're out there being rogue, right, you're going to get fined. You're going to get fined. So if you can't produce, that buyer broker agreement, the pre-touring agreement, or the showing agreement, you are going to be fined, and the fines are not $50. I believe the first fine is $500. And then if you have another violation, it goes from there. If you provide the form and any of those agreements are not correct, then the brokerage will be fined. And trust me, Phil does not want to be fined. So the only forms, I know, some agents have, probably because, the buyer broker agreement, was so flimsy before, they kind of created their own with that provision that, kind of held, the buyer accountable, meaning you could sue them and basically collect your attorney fees, court costs. That is in the new buyer broker agreement. So the only forms we should be working with are the Florida Realtor forms. That way we know we are not going to have an issue. The forms are fairly easy to fill out, and all should be good. We shouldn't have any violations. And then Dalton Wade compliance. So again, we're going to use 8/17 as the date. So, if a transaction, went under agreement 8/17 and on, then you are going to need to submit the buyer broker agreement, the property pre-touring agreement, or the showing agreement, something that shows us you were compliant. And then you are also going to need, to submit that commission agreement. You're going to have had to go, unless the buyer in the end is actually paying you, then you wouldn't need the commission agreement. But we will be really holding, because again, they're going to be on this, especially in the beginning. So we all want to be compliant. We just have to, complete the forms and, put them into the file. All right, let's talk a little bit about, again, presenting your value. We've touched upon this in previous webinars, especially as the buyer's agent, right? I mean, I think listing agents, there's maybe a little less concern how this is going to affect them. Talk about your experience, right? Let them know, that you've done this before. Obviously, if you're a brand new agent, or if you've only closed a couple transactions as a buyer's agent, you may not really talk so much about this. You maybe go right into, you're going to show them, as many homes as they need to see. You have a full understanding of the market and what represents value, right? Again, people list, on the list side, people can list homes for whatever they want. That doesn't mean it's worth it, right? You're knowledgeable, you're out there, you're using expertise, care, diligence, skill, right? And you know the market, right? That's what you're going to be communicating. You have this is very, very important number, this bullet here. You have a detailed understanding of the purchase contract, every line, every section, and every paragraph. It's tricky. Mary does, the contract training, every other week. Take it, get familiar with it, get better at it, right? Speak to it. I mean, that is your value, right? The only people that can, excuse me, comment on a contract, a real estate contract, are, real estate agents and attorneys, right? So again, you're going to communicate that to that buyer, that you know that contract inside and out. You're going to ensure that, let them know you're going to ensure, all the important dates are adhered to. You're on top of the, inspection contingency, the escrow deposit, the financing contingency, all of it. You're going to be present at the home inspection, to guide and potentially negotiate. You're going to, follow up timely, with lenders, insurers, title companies, right? Appraisers, again, to make sure the transaction, gets to closing. You're going to review the title commitment. You're going to understand that, right? Again, if something comes back, I believe it's 3 days to respond, and you're going to do that. So you're on top of that. You're going to be there, to make sure that that property is being turned over to them, just like it was when they first viewed it. And then you're going to, they have questions on the settlement statement. You're going to make sure they understand, all the charges and expenses. You're going to work with them from showing them that first house all the way to the end, right? So again, talk a little bit about, some strategies to get folks to sign, either, and when I say buyer broker agreement, that is synonymous with, the buyer broker agreement, the property pre-touring agreement, or the showing agreement. You are going to, you know, obviously, if it's someone that's referred to you, you come highly recommended, probably easier to get that signed. Maybe you can go right to the buyer broker agreement. You're going to explain this is a new requirement that all buyers must sign when working with a realtor, right? So it's not just you, right, asking this, right? If they want to work with a realtor, which, really somebody else who isn't a realtor, it's difficult to even operate. In the state of Florida, you don't have access to the MLS, the lockbox system, kind of all that stuff. So it's not just you, right, asking them to sign this, right? It is going to be a requirement. Communicate that to them, let them know of the changes, and kind of meet it head on. We have the buyer, the buyer presentation. It's downloadable, at this web address on the Join Dalton Wade website. You can edit it, you can, change it, you can adjust it to your specific needs, and then again, explain your value, right? And then potentially you probably, especially if it's somebody you're meeting online, you probably are going to want to start with that, pre-touring agreement or the showing agreement. All right, we did have in previous webinars some questions on some open houses, and I have to say, the legal hotline, they do a pretty good job most of the time, but there's been some kind of conflicting information coming out of there. So again, if you're conducting an open house, right, and that buyer wants to write an offer, and it's not your listing, you are going to need to get that buyer broker, agreement, or the pre-touring agreement, or a showing agreement, signed, kind of memorializing that they are working with you. And obviously, if it's a Dalton Wade listing, you are going to need the one that says transaction broker. All right, so a couple other things, and then we'll take it to question and answer. So again, we talked a little bit about that commission agreement. You're going to need that. right? That is what is going to ensure you as the buyer's agent that you are going to be paid. That can be either signed by the listing brokerage or the seller. Typically, it's going to be the listing brokerage if they have a listing agreement. It's going to be the seller. I mean, they can sign it as well if it's a FSBO. And then again, I touched upon this previously. If you're the listing agents, you want to get ahead of this, right? You want to get that compensation agreement signed by me so that when that buyer, if your client is offering commission, right, and it's in the listing agreement, and they're saying, hey, are you offering, compensation if I'm the buyer? Yeah, here it is. You just send it over to them. If they put in the offer, they have their broker sign it. We're all good, right? So, that as a listing agent, you are going to hear that. You're going to be asked that. So have that commission agreement already signed by me, so that when the buyer's agent asks you, here it is. We're good, right? And then if you have both sides of the transaction as a listing agent, again, what they told me today was that you do need a buyer, either a buyer broker, property pre-touring, or showing agreement. The only time you wouldn't need this is if you got a non-brokerage relationship signed by the buyer saying, we are not representing you. But if you are representing them as a transaction broker, you do need the buyer broker or property pre-touring or showing agreement signed. All right, and then some other resources. So if you go on NAR, it's nar.realtor, the facts, right? Just Google, NAR facts. This link will come up. There's like 80 frequently asked questions. I think it does a fairly good job explaining everything. So that's a good resource to check out. All right, so Mary, if you can turn the chat back on, and
Yep, everything is on, and we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A section too.
all right, so let me go through them. If you have any, type them in. Let's see. Hold on. Get down to the questions. John, it said, John says, as an agent, how do I fill this out? I mean, so basically, hopefully maybe you asked that, kind of before we got into sort of looking at the buyer broker agreement or the property, touring agreement. If you still have a question, type it in and I'll try to answer it, John. Let's see. Hold on. You have a few AI assistants asking questions or taking notes. Hey, Joanna. So yeah, PAR is the Pensacola Association of Realtors. So that's already been out of there for a little bit now. So you are already operating under those new rules. You need that buyer broker agreement now, or the the property pre-touring agreement or showing agreement. And then, if you are working with a buyer, you are going to need that, compensation agreement from the listing brokerage or the seller. Hey Monty, yep, we will have this live tomorrow on the Dalton Wade website. So you can take a look at it there. The PowerPoint will be there as well. Mark says he had the thunderstorm in Wesley Chapel. Glad you're here, Mark. Thank you so much. Let's see. What exactly are non-allowables? That's a good question. So I don't know. I've always kind of wondered that myself. Good question. Anybody know? Type it in so we can help Lacey there. Let's see. Surges and fees in the context of VA loan refer to costs that the top does not permit veterans to pay. So there you go. Something along that. Thank you. Can we have the buyer broker agreement on our iPad and have them sign it or do it in person? either way, PM, I mean, you can have them, sign it before you meet them, sign it at the property. I mean, the key thing is that it's signed, right? I mean, you're really not supposed to be showing anybody a property, taking them into a home without that. Um, It's a great question, Carolyn. I mean, we would have to sue them. I mean, and go after them. Maybe contact the listing brokerage and file a complaint. Because again, remember something that I think is going to become a lot more important now is that when you're meeting a buyer, like sometimes you might not like ask, hey, do you have a buyer broker agreement? Now you definitely need to ask because again, it's a violation if you sign a buyer broker agreement and somebody has already executed one. So you would need to be careful there to, hey, have you signed this with anybody else? Hopefully they say no. How can you get buyer and seller to pay? Um, Not sure exactly of your question, John, but I mean, you can't get them both to pay. Um, the most again you can receive is what is on that buyer broker agreement or, property pre-touring agreement or showing agreement, whatever that is, that you're capped out at that, right? If the seller is paying more or they're offering a bonus, too bad. Again, if you're on the listing side, and then you see the buyer broker agreement, and that is only, 2%, but you're offering 2.5%. Per the legal hotline today, you're going to need to, speak with the seller and potentially, modify that listing agreement, right? Something needs to be modified, right? Maybe what now is being paid to the buyer's agent now matches up 2%, or maybe we're only going to receive 4.5%, 2.5% for us, 2% for the buyer's agent. We are not going to be able to accept bonuses. That's pretty clear. That's one that hurts. Hopefully what they do, the builders, is they put it in the commission as opposed to calling it a bonus, right? But again, the takeaway is that whatever is on that buyer broker agreement is all that you can receive. Yes, they will, Patty. I believe that is section 7A, but that you are able to do that. Yeah, I mean, again, that's good question, Sue. I mean, that's a good one. I mean, again, hopefully what will happen is that, say you have the showing agreement or the property pre-touring agreement signed, and now they're ready to put an offer in. Hopefully then they're willing to sign the buyer broker agreement, something more formal. I don't know that that is not a requirement, kind of where it gets a little tricky there, but ideally, the buyer broker agreement does give more protection really to both parties. It's for both. John's asking the buyer broker agreement for both single agent and transaction broker. Absolutely. So again, Uh, hey Tito, no, not at all. Like they should only have one. I mean, it's hard to like know for sure if somebody tells you they haven't signed something with somebody and they have. Obviously that's a problem potentially, but no, they should only be working with one agent. I mean, I think that is one of the benefits sometimes that is overlooked here. That buyers working with several agents, that really is going away or should be going away. For location, yeah, I mean, it can be city, county, several counties. It could be probably as broad as Florida if you wanted to. Um, so again, yeah, I know on the credit check, I mean, I'm not sure we're gonna do that. I mean, again, what you might ask, Alexander, is for their pre-approval. Kind of then telling you that, the lender ran their credit and kind of gave you the, um, well, their retainer, would be paid out to you, immediately. It's not going to go into escrow. So you would send it in, and then, do your CDA like you always do, and we would pay you. Um, Again, the retainer is reduced. So let's just say, you're doing it for 2.5%. You've asked for $1,000 retainer. We have the $1,000 retainer. Um, the home they buy is 400,000. Um, it's 2.5% is what they agreed to. And the seller agrees to that, so you're getting 10,000, except you already received 1,000, right? So now, at closing, you would only get 9,000. Nothing happens to those. What happens with exclusive listing agreements that do not expire before August 17th? Nothing happens except that once, whatever that date is, and, again, they couldn't have all the dates be the same for all the MLSs. They're doing it all differently, but, whatever that date is, once that data is out, like the listing agreement survives, the listing agreement is still in effect. Say you sign a listing agreement today and it's for 6 months, that's still good, right? But what you're going to need once that commission data is out there is, something signed by Dalton Wade, right? We're going to look on the listing agreement and we're going to see, the seller agreed to offer 2.5%. And then you are going to do a commission agreement, right? Signed by the brokerage, signed by me, saying we are paying 2.5%. So when the buyer submits the offer or is asking you, you already have it. You can just give it to them. And then when they submit the offer, they have their broker sign it and off we go. Hey, Robert, how are you? Well, here's what I can tell you is that we would only charge you once, whether it's the retainer or the commission. But let me look into that a little bit further, and we will get back to you on that. Retainer is not mandatory. A retainer is optional at best. I mean, I think most most buyers, again, I think, are probably not looking to pay a retainer. I think that, potentially, could be a hard sell. We have to see how that goes. Again, it's all negotiation, it's all chatting. But certainly getting somebody to pay you a retainer is probably harder than getting someone just to work with you and signing the buyer broker agreement. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that, John. I don't quite know yet. I think the commission agreement, can be signed. I believe that's gonna have to be signed by the broker. The actual buyer broker, um, pre-property touring and the showing agreement potentially can be signed by you, but I'm gonna have to, get back to everyone on that. So good question. Patty says this says we work as what you say we could use any agent. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can be a transaction broker or you can be a single agent. I mean, it is your personal decision which you choose. However, again, if it's a Dalton Wade listing, you do have to transition to transaction broker, so that you can show that property. But yeah, you can be a single agent. I mean, obviously a single agent, when you're kind of promoting, the buyer broker agreement does have more, kind of teeth, and maybe is easier to sell than a transaction broker. Hey, Carol, glad you liked the questions. We're kind of working through them. See what's next. How do we handle a buyer and seller who want an agent to write the contracts? What form is there for that? What fee do we charge for that? Well, again, you would have a commission agreement potentially. You could have a listing agreement. Um, so it really depends on, kind of what you're doing. I think the forms that are out there work for that. And again, like, what fee do we charge? I mean, again, remember, that's the whole thing here. Like, commissions are negotiable, right? Commissions are, I mean, obviously, as an agent, you want to get compensated the most you possibly can, right? I mean, but is the buyer or seller willing to do that? So it's kind of a negotiated thing with, the clients. Yeah, I don't really see the questions until I get to this point, guys. I'm sorry, it's too much kind of reading. Again, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. If you think you missed something, you're not clear on something, type them in and we will answer them. Okay, so Ed, I don't know what you're saying here. Don't make the mistake of transitioning from single to, because becoming a dual agent in Florida is illegal. Okay, that is not that is not correct at all. Again, what allows us to do both sides, again, right, as an individual agent, the listing agent can have both the seller and the buyer, but they need to be a transaction broker. Thank you, Jill Chen. Yep, we are a transaction broker state. The default is always transaction broker. It's when you're a single agent, right? Either as the listing agent or the buyer's agent, that's fine. You can do that, except then if you're the listing agent and a Dalton Wade agent wants to show the property, you need to transition to transaction broker. And if you're a buyer's agent as a single agent and you're showing a Dalton Wade listing, you need to transition to transaction broker. Transaction broker is what allows us to have both sides. So we ought to have both sides, whether it's an individual agent having both the buyer and the seller, or two Dalton Wade agents, one having the seller, one having the buyer. We have to be transaction brokers on both sides. We have to be neutral. That's what allows us to have both sides, is that neutrality. When you say that brokerage agreement be an attachment in the MLS, is that the commission agreement that you're referring to, Caroline? I'm assuming it is. No, it cannot be an attachment in the MLS. No commission data whatsoever can be in the MLS in any shape or form. Again, that's like an instantaneous fine. Well, I mean, I think again, the replay, still is saying she went over the form so fast, couldn't follow, ha ha ha. Well, again, we are going to have this recorded. The forms are there. You can read the forms. You should become knowledgeable of the forms, right? I mean, again, so that when you're asking to sign something, and they ask you a question, you don't want to seem unknowledgeable. That would be, I think, not good. Like, I'm asking an agent is asking me to sign something and they can't really communicate what I'm signing. Do I really want to work with that person? So again, I think understanding these forms, right, again, is critical. Hey, Joanna. So Joanna is asking, so in the event that a buyer refuses to pay the commission, even if there is a buyer broker agreement signed, does the closing still take place even if the buyer refuses to pay? I do not know that one off the top of my head. I have to get back to you on that. I will do that. Good question. Don't know. Not, hey, Elaine. So Elaine is asking every single showing the MLS wants this. No, that is not how this works. So if you have a showing agreement might be for one property, right? So then if you're going to show them other properties, you need something else signed. If you have a property pre-touring agreement, and let's say that's for 2 weeks, after 2 weeks, you need to get something else signed. You need to get either that extended, or at that point, maybe, they're comfortable working with you. You can go to the buyer broker agreement. Hey, Maggie, I certainly hope not. Is this going to cause a rise in our E&O insurance? I mean, hopefully not. I mean, I think here's how I think this is going to go down, guys. I think that I've spoken to the folks over at MLS. I can't say this unequivocally. I think there is going to be some grace period, right? Some grace period. Not that you want to think like that, or because again, you don't want to get called out, but I think, maybe the first month, right? They're going to be maybe a little bit more lenient, right? But after time, once this gets kind of fully integrated, you got to have this down. Again, at the end of the day, my belief is this is better. This is what got us in trouble. And I've talked about this before, is real estate agents that basically took advantage of clients to the client's detriment. They often are, I use that L word, like lazy agents, right? They're all about themselves. They don't really care about the client. I think some of that, is going away. So hopefully it's not going to raise our E&O insurance. I think what I'm probably most worried about, not that it's an E&O issue, but I think for me as the broker, this is a heck of a lot of work. This is a lot of work, a lot of effort. And I think where the effort is going to come is when you sign that buyer broker agreement, and then for whatever reason, they don't want to work with you. And now we're in some type of, problem. They want out and now they have to pay, maybe, a release amount, right? Those type of things. So again, we don't want that. I mean, it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. We don't get along with every single client we work with, but it should be rare. Should be rare. But again, it speaks to, if you're doing a good job, right, and you're on top of your game, you're not going to have any issues. Oh, I didn't hear from the agent for a week. I wanted to go out on, Saturday and Monday, and they couldn't accommodate me. I think agents like that's going to be potentially a problem. All right, so Ed says, when you have a single agent sign, make sure you transition to a transaction broker if it's your listing or if it's a Dalton Wade listing. All the listings are Dalton Wade's listings, right? They're all Dalton Wade's listing. If you think the brokerage owns everything at the end of the day. That's how this is all set up, right? So let's expand upon that concept, right? So again, the brokerage owns the listing. That's why if it's another Dalton Wade agent, right, showing that listing, we have to transition to transaction broker unless, oh, The listing agent is a transaction broker and the buyer's agent is a transaction broker. There's nothing to do. Transaction broker is what allows us to have both sides of the transaction. That is a thing specific to Florida. Many other states, that's not how it works, but that's how it works here in Florida. No, I mean, I think you can do, so you can do one, right? All they want you to have, meaning compliance, MLS compliance, is that you got something signed from that buyer when you showed them that property. A showing agreement has the least amount of teeth, right? Probably expires pretty quick, might just be for one property. Property pre-touring agreement, a little bit more, right? Again, I think it's a good thing because it's less, somebody signing a one-page document that's pretty simple is easier to get done than somebody signing, a 3 or 4 page buyer broker agreement. So all you need is one, right? It at some point expires. If it expired, and you've done a great job for that buyer, they're gonna re-sign it. They're not gonna start with somebody else. Well, I think, Jill Chen, a lot of people sign single agent agreements. I mean, I think the benefit of having a single agent relationship with the client is that you're giving them more. You're a fiduciary, you have more responsibilities to them, right? And sometimes agents use that as a selling point to either get the listing or to get the buyer. But if you can get someone to sign as a transaction broker, right? Either the listing agreement or the, buyer broker agreement or the, property pre-touring agreement, that's better, right? Because we're committing less to them. Yeah, I would agree. More stuff to, to make it's more. There's more here. There certainly is, we don't, I mean, again, I don't know. All I know is this is coming. We have to, we have to adhere to it. Um, it's just, it is what it is. Well, I think we will have a completed, buyer broker agreement up on the website shortly, as well as the property pre-touring. Again, read, like, again, this is to inform you, to educate you, but you still got to fill out the form yourself, right? So read the forms, get comfortable with the forms, understand the forms. If there's something in there you don't understand, call me, call support, and we'll help you through it. So Patty asks, we don't need the commission agreement or showing agreement if it's our listing, correct? Well, I think you need the commission agreement signed by me that says we are paying this to the buyer's agent, right? So you want that, right? You want to have that so that when they say, hey, what are you offering? I'm submitting an offer, right? You're not like, going back and forth and right, you already have it. You can give it to them and you can tell them, and here it is signed. Well, again, so as it relates to the buyer broker agreement, I mean, here's what it is. It's a percentage or a flat fee. If you're charging that plus a transaction fee, there's a line where that can go. Work with the forms, read the forms, take a look at the forms, get comfortable with the forms. If you have specific questions on the forms, let us know. We're happy to, we're happy to answer them. Submit where in regards to compliance? Well, when you're submitting your file, so we can pay you at closing, right? So we're not going to approve your file so you can be paid if there's a contract issued, let's use August 17th as, kind of the drop dead date. You put a contract in, and it's signed August 20th and there's no buyer broker agreement. We're not paying, you can't get paid. You're not in compliance. You got to have this. This is serious. Really, it is. It is. They're going to be looking. I started by saying we are not out of the woods. So we need to be compliant. We need to understand that. I appreciate everybody being here. I really do. It shows great initiative and the ability to want to learn. But, this, like, there's going to be a learning period here, guys. There really is. I call the legal hotline, I get conflicting information. Someone up in the Panhandle in Pensacola, they've already changed the property pre-touring agreement. It came out today. There's a lot of work here for everybody. There really is. But once this is the hardest part, we're going into it right now. This has been out there since March 15th, but we're finally getting, to the end. But if you have questions, we're here to answer them. We want to be compliant. We don't want any issues. No one does. Thank you. Great, great, great comment. Carolyn says everyone should take the accredited buyer represent, training to show our value. Carl says he has a question. Hopefully he's typed it in somewhere. Let's see. Thank you, Ron. So again, Ron, buyer's been paying me since 2014. Not a big thing. Right. Like if you're in Georgia, I know no one is, Patty has a license here, but in Georgia, you don't take somebody out without a buyer broker agreement. It's just how it's done. They just don't do it. Right. So again, that's how it's going to be here. And again, you are not working in a vacuum. You are not working, oh, I'm the only person asking for this. No, everybody is supposed to be. Hey, Juan asked, do we have a buyer broker agreement termination form? I have to look and see. Again, not sure on that one. So Greg asks, NAR monitors this. Well, yeah, NAR, and then through the MLSs, that is who is, kind of being charged. Don't forget, NAR kicked out, I think, $485 million. This is serious, serious. I think, at the end, realtors, brokerages, thank God, Dalton Wade fell right under the settlement. We're included in the settlement just by the skin of our chinny chin chin. So again, NAR is going to monitor through the MLS's compliance with this. How much of that they're going to do, who knows? I would imagine they're going to do some. It's August 6th, Elaine, that Stellar is taking it out. Again, it's we've talked previously. If you're taking a buyer out now, right, it's probably in your best interest to start to have them sign one of those forms, showing agreement, property, pre-touring agreement, buyer broker agreement. Yeah, so Jill Chen has, been looking at the ABR documentation and she's right. There is some, just things that are, inconsistent. So, but as I said, I mean, I think, I can't be certain of this. Is there going to be some type of grace period? Are they going to have some exceptions in the beginning? Um, Well, obviously it's best you could possibly do a Zoom with them, kind of you could meet them somewhere before you could meet them at, at the property and get them to sign it there. And so I think again, where this is going to be a little trickier is when you're meeting people online that you've never met before, you have no relationship with them. But remember, the next person they meet is going to ask them for the same thing. So why not work with you, right? Because you are going to explain to them what a great job you're going to do. I mean, again, before, right? Most times you kind of show like, hey, I set up a tour. We're going to go look at 5 houses. You show them the houses. You didn't really explain, at least I didn't. I haven't really done, any production in a few years now, but back when I did, I didn't do this. Now you have to. You have to. And again, it's competition. That's what they're looking for. That's why they've made these changes. These changes just didn't come out of the blue. There were problems with the way people operated. Now, again, the United States is a large country. What went on in Kansas City, Missouri? I don't know. Maybe it's a very controlled market and, there you could sort the listings by what commission was paid and, on and on and on. When you added it all up, at the end of the day, it seemed to be anti-consumer. And they lost. They lost. NAR poo-pooed all this till the end, and they lost. Rentals. Hey, Lisa, how are you? Lisa's asking, how does this affect rentals? If you have a tenant, rentals do not, this does not apply for rentals. Hey, Michelle, how are you? It really depends. If you have a listing and, it goes under agreement before the data is stripped out of your MLS, then no, you don't need to do anything. Think of it like this. Today, like if you're say, let's Stellar, which is pulling the data out on the 6th of August. So up until then, it's business as it's always been. No buyer broker agreement, no commission agreement. None of that applies because, the commission is in the MLS. But as soon as that data is taken out of the MLS, I guarantee you when a buyer's agent shows your property, they are going to ask you, what are you offering commission? And what you're going to hopefully already have done is you're going to have sent in, and had us sign the commission agreement, letting them know that, we did it, I believe, 2 weeks ago. There's a training we did just specifically on the commission agreement part of it. We have that up online. Can you send out a question and answer via email to all agents to answer all the questions in the chat tonight? We can try. I don't know if I can get that out tomorrow but we can certainly a few things need to be answered. Well, the compliance department, it's like a bucket. I don't sign these things. I mean, someone is in there now, they look through the files and they sign on my behalf. So it's a full-time job signing. So it's not something that I physically personally do, but as long as, the people have been trained, they know what to look for. They're checking to make sure everything is, filled out and completed. And then they sign it. No, the commission agreement, I think we talked about this, the commission agreement, either from the seller or from the brokerage cannot be in the MLS. It can be not, they'll fine you right away on that. So you'll have to remove that. Um, so no commission data in the MLS. Can you do the 2.25 minus 300 still? Yep, you can still do that, provided that's what's on the listing agreement, right? A buyer non-rep agreement, what exactly is a buyer non-rep agreement? So do you ever see, let's look at what's in the MLS now, it'll say, right, when you, are looking, it'll say a single agent, right? 2.5%, transaction broker, 2.5%, non-rep or non-brokerage, 1% or often zero. So basically you are not representing them. So basically, it's like, say you're selling your own, say you have a listing, it's your own property, you find a buyer, right, yourself that doesn't have an agent, right? You can't be neutral to them because it's your property. So you have a conflict. So if you want to still work with that buyer, they would need to sign a representation agreement. Dalton Wade is not representing them. I think John is asking the same question. So the non-brokerage agreement is the brokerage, like say, you've met a buyer, on your listing and you don't want to work with them. You're not remember, like transaction broker, right? Transaction broker is what allows us to have both sides of the deal. Oh, I don't want to work with that buyer. I'm not representing them. I'm representing the seller. Then they would need to sign a non-brokerage agreement. You're always a transaction broker. Otherwise, unless otherwise disclosed. Let me give you another example. You are, out working with a buyer and you see a FSBO, for sale by owner. And the for sale by owner, you say to them, hey, if I bring my buyer by, will you pay me 2.5%? And they say, yes, I would gladly do that. And then you get them to sign a commission agreement, right? Commission agreement to make sure you're compensated. Then you say, so as soon as you go under agreement, right, you are now representing that seller as a transaction broker. Unless you get a non-brokerage relationship from them. Oh, I'm not representing you, Mr. Seller. So you're always a transaction broker unless otherwise disclosed. Could be a single agent. You disclose that. They signed something that said, I'm a single agent. Or I don't want to work with you. I'm not representing you. Therefore, they have to sign the non-brokerage relationship. Hey, Stan. Stan's asking, what do we do with contracts already in process? Nothing. Nothing. Everything is fine until August. I know Stan is in Stellar MLS until August 6th, when that commission data is gone, right? Then anything after that, the new rules apply, right? You're now, oh, I just met a buyer and I'm taking him out on August 10th. You would need one of those three buyer broker agreements: buyer broker agreement, property pre-touring, or showing agreement. You will also be asking, hey, I want to submit an offer. you're going to ask, hey, Mr. Listing Agent, is your client offering compensation to the buyer's agent? And they say yes. And then hopefully they're like you, Stan, on top of their game, right? And they already have that commission agreement signed by their broker. Remember, the seller pays the broker, right? The seller pays the listing brokerage. Then the listing brokerage pays out of that the buyer's agent. That's what allows the brokerage to sign the commission agreement. If you're the agent and the buyer, you probably still would need to, sign, the buyer broker agreement with yourself. Um, I'm going to get back whether you guys can sign those or if Dalton Wade can do that. Um, but then again, you would need, that disclosure, owner's interest in property. Whenever you're buying something for yourself, you need to let that know, the other side know you're an agent. If you're selling your property or you have an interest in a property you're selling, you have to let the other side know you're an agent. Hey, Jeff, how are you? Will I have to do new listing agreements for my existing? No, there's no having to do that. Those listing agreements are still in force, nothing changing there. The only thing you would, again, you don't have to have it immediately, but it would be wise to have it. You want to have that commission agreement signed so that when the buyer says, are you offering commission? Here it is, right here. You can send them the form. No, Sue, I think what Ron is saying is that he always gets the buyer broker agreement signed by his buyers. There are agents out there that this is like, what's the big deal? I've already done this. I already do this. This is how I operate. I'm not taking anybody out, without that buyer broker agreement. I mean, the property pre-touring agreement is new. Showing agreement has always been there, right? But there are agents, they won't work with you. Think of it, right? I mean, it's all happened to all of us. We've been jilted, right? Oh, I showed them 3 times. And then, I remember an agent telling me they took this client out, bang, bang, multiple times, young, first time home buyer. And then they're ready to put an offer in or getting ready to buy. And then the woman's father says, no, you're working with my agent. You're working with my agent. Dalton Wade agent is left out in the cold. But if he had a buyer broker agreement, he wouldn't have been left out in the cold. That's the advantage of this. This is good. This is good. Don't be scared of this. Be scared of it if you're one of those kind of flim flam real estate agents that doesn't do much and likes to, do the least amount of work to get paid. Hey, Kim, we will definitely do that. I know we're working on that. Do we need to change anything in the MLS? No, nothing needs to change in the MLS because but the MLS is changing. You don't need to change anything. They're just taking those fields out and they're adding a concession field. John, that's a good question. How are you, John? As a listing agent, if we were willing to co-broke, but the buyer's agent didn't give us back a signed commission agreement with the buyer's offer, do we still have to pay them? I don't know that one off the top of my head. I have to get back to you on that. Hi Ho is looking anybody. He's up there in Pensacola as well. Great guy. Reach out to him. I think we've answered John's asking, will existing listing contracts need to be redone? Nope, they don't need to be redone. I will double check on that, John. But again, I think, John's asking, as an agent, I'm going to buy a property for myself. What's the procedure? The conservative, the least risky is you just sign the buyer broker agreement. It's like, when you're a Dalton Wade agent, you're selling your house, we still sign a listing agreement, right? So you're going to sign the buyer broker agreement. What happens to new construction, existing agreement? Nothing. Everything, again, I know, because we're typing these in and Bill's getting to them to answer. So again, anything in place prior to the data coming out of the MLS, nothing has changed. So nothing will change. If you're under agreement for a new construction, and they're offering a bonus, you're still going to get that bonus. It's only after the change occurs, and the change is predicated when they take that commission data out of your particular MLS. You need the buyer broker agreement, the pre-touring agreement, the showing agreement, and then you're going to need a commission agreement to make sure you get paid. Nope, you cannot put, can we put up to 3%? No. You can put 3%, or you can put 2.5%. It cannot be like up to, it cannot be a range, right? It has to be a specific number. So obviously you'd rather get 3%. I mean, you can always modify it later and reduce it if need be, and you can always modify it and increase it if your client is willing to do that. Hey Ed, nope. Yeah, I mean the location can be, your town, your city, your county, several counties, or Florida. And then no, we do not need one for every home we show in that time frame. We just, the agreements, right? I'm going to use the buyer. I'm going to say buyer broker agreement, but that covers the three agreements: showing agreement, property pre-touring agreement, and the buyer broker agreement. You just need one. It's from a date. You say you're going to meeting a client tomorrow. They're going to sign it. They'll say, hey, I know you. It's referred to you by my brother. He speaks very highly of you. I'm willing to work with you for 6 months because he told me you are a rock star. You're covered for 6 months. Thank you, Nancy. We will get that up. Probably it's on under training, and then it's pre-recorded webinars. You'll see it. Should be up tomorrow afternoon. I believe lease listings do not apply. Kyle, how are you? Don't have to worry about that. There you go. Hey, Laura, how you doing? Yeah, I mean, I think they're making this as, by having these other agreements, as painless as possible. What is the solution for compensation with VA buyers? Well, I do believe the concession field can work with VA buyers. Like you can get them a concession, and part of that can, pay your commission. Here's again, I think the vast, vast, vast majority of sellers in the market we're in are still going to offer compensation, right? So they are still wanting to incent you to bring your buyers by. One of the things, no one really talks about this, but what does the listing agent do? Maybe they're the ones who are going to get squeezed, right? Maybe, there'll be a lot more entry only listings. Who knows? Or maybe someone, hey, what do you do as a listing agent? Maybe you're only worth 1% or less. I want those buyers. We don't know how this is going to evolve. We'll find out. So I heard you mention in the beginning about the buyer closing costs. Couldn't state about buyer agent. If, in a nutshell, if the seller agent do not agree to any compensation towards the buyer agent, can the buyer negotiate closing costs? Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, again, you can't write it up saying, that closing cost is for your commission. You can't do that. Has to be kept general. Prepaids, closing costs, non-allowables. And then they can take part of that or all of it and pay your commission. That is true. Usually, buyer closing costs are applied to actual closing costs. That is true. But again, now they can take part of their closing costs and use that to pay you. Well, I think, again, that's a really good question, Michael. I think how you do that, and again, I think this is a discussion, to have with your client. Maybe that house, right, that isn't offering any concession or any buyer agent commission, maybe that's not the house for them. Maybe that's not the house for them. Nope. Hey, Jacqueline, how are you? She's asking, will we need a pre-touring agreement for each house we show to the same client? No, you just need one agreement, right? I mean, the showing agreement typically is for one property or one day, right? But the pre-touring agreement is a little bit longer usually, and then the buyer broker agreement is a more flushed out document. But no, once you have one of those signed, you can show them as many properties as you like. Candy is asking, do builders still pay commission to buyers agents? Yeah, I think they do, and they will. I'm not, I mean, again, we don't know, you know. I think here's the thing, at least what I saw. So when things were crazy, say, now it's been, over 2 years, 2 to 3 years ago, right? Lennar, they paid 1% on the first deal, and then it kind of went up from there. Now they're offering 4%. It is a buyer's market. Sellers need buyers. So, buyer agent commission is not going away. I don't see. You can. Hey, Shada, yeah, you can definitely do that. I mean, again, you could always use a buyer broker agreement. They didn't have the property pre-touring agreement, but they have it now. You can use that right now. Again, certain agents wouldn't take somebody out without a buyer broker agreement. They're not trusting. They've probably been jilted. They've probably taken people out and wasted a whole bunch of time. Hey, hi, nope, nope, you're all good. You're all good. Someone was saying that PAR took the commission data already out. So whenever date that was, after that, you would need the buyer broker agreement. After that, you need the commission agreement to be ensured you're getting paid. If seller is offering more commission, how do we modify, an addendum, new agreement? Nope, you can't write that. Hey, Winnie, can you write on a buyer agreement that the buyer only wants to see homes that the seller will pay my broker? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Nope, can't do that. Right, it doesn't apply to rentals, so rentals, you don't have to worry. It's just, new construction and existing sales. Absolutely. You can send them the agreements via dot loop prior to meeting them, for sure. Well, Phil would probably pay those fees, but you would need to reimburse me. I mean, obviously, we were going to, I mean, again, it is the broker suing that buyer. We're not gonna, we would want to make sure that we have a, pretty good case, right? And that the person actually has some wherewithal to pay us. I don't believe that is allowed, John. Can your contact info be placed in the description? And that's again, a question for MLS. Ask them. They'll certainly know, but my sense is you can't do that. Um, hey Lisa, no, I wouldn't. I mean, only if they're, putting an offer in. Thank you, Ingrid. I appreciate that. We talked about this. Hey, Kara, nope. Do I need agreements for currently pending transactions? Nope. It's just as soon as that date kicks in, whenever that data is out of the MLS, everything we talked about, they are all in dot loop, Mike. They are all in dot loop. They get uploaded like almost instantaneously. Yeah, you can put zip codes. We currently have a listing in seller. We need to do a commission agreement on a file signed by DW to provide. Yes. Yep. I mean, again, once the date kicks in, you want to have that. Yep. If we currently have a listing in seller, do we need a commission agreement on file signed by DW to provide? Today, you don't necessarily need that, but I mean, why not get it in advance? Yes, yep. Actually, all the commission data is coming out of Stellar MLS on August 6th. There will be none. And then it's coming out of all the MLSs, but no later than August 17th. They are getting ahead of it. Well, I mean, the current listing agreement, it's not really grandfathered. We have that agreement. That agreement is not changing, right? So whatever that agreement is, Mike, it is what it is, right? The only thing that's going to be different as that listing agent is the buyer's agents, once this is implemented, are going to ask you, is your client paying commission? Right? And if the answer is yes, you're going to want to send them the commission agreement so they can have their broker sign it. My question is, when he is asking, if my question is, if the buyer just doesn't have enough money to pay the buyer, the buyer broker agreement costs, then maybe they shouldn't be buying a home at this time. But that's probably not what you're going to say to them. What you're going to say to them is, I am going to find you a property where the seller is going to pay. That, because again, if they don't have the money, they can't buy that property. Nope, I'm not. Hey, Carlisle, no, it's whatever is on the buyer broker agreement. right? And I think Shelley asked like up to 3%. No, that is no, can't do that. Has to be an exact number, 2.5%, 3%, 2%, $5,000, $8,000, something that is defined, right? So whatever you have on that buyer broker agreement, that is your maximum commission. That is your commission when working with a buyer. Lisa says it's ridiculous that we are not allowed to collect bonuses if the seller chooses to offer them. Okay, here's the concept. And I was going to skip over that question, but I do think I need to comment. Why they're doing that is because the buyer should get that money, not the agent. And that should ultimately be reflected in what they pay. That's the concept. The concept. So again, think of where this potentially could have gone. And it would have been terrible. And that is the seller can't pay anything. Really, that was on the table. This settlement is actually good. That's where this was headed. Think how bad that would have been. So, right, in negotiations, we have to sometimes compromise. So I'm pretty sure this was one of the compromises. This is one of the things that NAR had to agree to, which is the most you can get. Now, again, if you're a great negotiator as a buyer's agent and you say, hey, I get 3% because I'm going to do this. And, again, I've mentioned this last time we trained. I'm going to mention it now. One of the things people focus on, and we focused on this tonight so much, is the commission, the percentage, right? But that's really not what's important. What's important for that buyer is, hey, you were able to buy that house for me because you are so good. You are so effective. You were able to buy that house for $15,000 less for me. I gladly pay you $12,000 because I benefited. That's the message. But unfortunately, that all happens after. It's just like with a FSBO, and most of what I did as an agent was, I worked hard on those FSBOs, and they used to say to me, bring me a buyer, right? Because what they focus on is the commission. I don't want to pay a listing agent 2%, 2.5%, 3%. Okay. Well, and I gave that example. I'll give it again of, I had a client and, I had sold his house and was under agreement and we were scrambling to find something. And we had looked everywhere in 3 towns, every home, and the market was changing. It was starting to tick up. And he found a home on Zillow. He called me. He didn't call that seller directly. He trusted me. And he knew I had his best interest and I would help him. We go to that house and we're like, wow, this guy has underpriced his home. He priced it at 525 and it was worth 600. We knew the market. Put that house under agreement that day. The guy still paid me 2.5%, the FSBO. Oh, I didn't pay 12,000 or 15,000 to the listing agent, but I threw away 50 to 60 grand because I'm stupid. That's the mentality. Focus on what a seller receives and what a buyer pays. Maybe you communicate to that buyer, hey, I'm going to buy that house for less for you because or I'm going to get that house. Do you think a buyer knows about an escalation clause and how I can win that offer for you? Or do you think if 5 offers come in for a seller, they're going to go to highest and best and they're a FSBO? don't be scared. Be aggressive. Feel you are a benefit to both. And if they don't want to work with you, that's their problem. They're the loser. A little bit of a rant there, but that's how I feel, really. It's unbelievable. People, I mean, I've been in this business now. It's my 16th year. I hate to say, but it is. I love it. But, again, that's what people think. It's all about the commission, not what they pay or not what they get. You gotta flip that. I'm not sure, Jennifer. I don't know. Thank you so much for those referrals to Patricia and Ginny. I really appreciate that. Thank you. But I don't know. We'll see. I mean, hopefully they're on top of this. They're ahead of this. I mean, it's in their best interest, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, technically, John's asking, what about if a buyer to sign at 3% and seller 2% buyer has to pay difference? Absolutely, that's the agreement. It's a great question, Santiago. He's asking if a buyer forgot or was not aware, they had a previous contract and they signed another with me. Am I liable? I don't know that you're so liable. I think you would be liable if you just signed and you didn't ask them, right? I mean, hey, are you working with anybody else? And they tell you no, and you have that in a text or in an email. I think you're covered. Marva, you said it eloquently. Doesn't apply to transactions already in progress prior to the go date, as long as those fields haven't been removed. So as soon as those commission fields are removed, these new rules have kicked in. I will try to do that. Maybe we will come up with kind of a frequently asked question section on the website. Give us a couple days or so to do that. I think that would probably be the easiest way, and then we'll, blast out that we have that. That's a question I can't answer. What happens if they sign multiple agreements? I'll try to find that answer, John. Multiple buyer broker agreements. I think we touched upon this. Stella, how are you? What about contracts that are under agreement now? Nothing has changed. No, you can't do that. Can you put percentage plus any bonus the seller may offer? No, you can't do that. Can't do that, unfortunately. So again, Lisa was asking, can you put 2% plus any bonus the seller may offer? No, that would be a violation. That is not acceptable. Can't do that. Can we modify the buyer broker agreement? Hey, Christine, to increase our commission if seller? Absolutely. You can do that. You can do that. If the seller, excuse me, the buyer is willing to sign, can we modify the buyer broker agreement to increase our commission? If the seller is offering more than our original agreement, yes, you can. Are those new forms, they're in dot loop, can they automatically be added to the loop for the buyer agent? They just came out today, so we'll have to kind of work on that. But we will get that, rocking and rolling tomorrow, so they should be there shortly. All right, let's see. Christine says, takeaway from the meeting, implement the new agreement forms by August 17th for any new transactions. All agents, except if your MLS has already, stripped out the commission data. then you need to do that sooner, right? Submit the required buyer broker showing agreement forms to Dalton Wade for any transaction on or after. Absolutely. We're going to sign those. Have the compensation agreement signed by the listing in advance to provide to buyers. Right. Absolutely. Get that done. Give us a couple days to kind of get a alert the compliance folks, but shouldn't be a big deal. Transition to using the transaction a broker agreement from a form when representing both buyer and seller sides of a transaction. Absolutely. So again, if you're a single agent and then Dalton Wade is on both sides, right, either as one agent, right, who has the seller and the buyer, or two different Dalton Wade agents, right, one having the listing and one having the buyer, we need to be transaction brokers. Now, again, if the listing agreement is transaction broker and the buyer broker agreement is transaction broker, then there's nothing to transition to. Hey, Judy, if you are working with a buyer out of the country and you show the property via video, do you need an agreement to sending the video? My gut is telling me yes, you will, but I will have to check on that. So again, think of it like this, the most conservative way, the way that you will not ever get in trouble or have any type of issue is you have it signed. It's kind of when you're like, oh, do I need it signed? Maybe I need it signed. Oh, they're not here. I'm not really showing them the property. I'm doing it by video. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'll find out. We are not allowed to receive any bonuses from builders. Hey, Javier, how are you? Yeah, there are no bonuses, no bonuses. But again, now maybe what the builders do is they increase the commission, right? But then if your, buyer broker agreement is less, then you're only getting that. All right, a few more questions. No, the is the buyer, Carlisle's asking, is the buyer's agreement pre-printed at 2.5%, or can I? Yeah, you can get more, you can get less. I mean, there's I think one of the benefits of Dalton Wade is it's your business. All I ask is we do things legally, compliant, and we follow the code of ethics. But if you want to charge 1%, 2%, or 4%, that is your business. You get to decide. That would be great. That would be true, Kara. Yeah, I believe, again, you have to modify that agreement. She was asking, I believe you can receive bonuses from builders. You just have to ask the buyers to adjust the agreement. That would be correct. Stanley is asking, what do we need to do with current listing agreements that specify commission compensation? Nothing, nothing. Except once the data is out of Stellar, you are going to get a commission agreement signed by the brokerage so that when the buyer's agent asks you, are you offering commission, you can send it to them. Emil is asking, what if your showing agreement is 3%, but the seller only pays 2.5%? Well, one of two things can happen. You can reduce it and tell your seller that, or your buyer, that you're willing to work for 2.5%, or you can charge them the 0.5%. All right, a few more questions. Hey, Andrew. Andrew's asking, what happens if you are the listing agent and have listings that were active prior to the effective date of the new rules? Nope, nothing needs to change. I think I just answered that question for Stanley. How can I make the buyer's agreement match what the listing agent is willing to pay me? Well, I mean, you really can't, because again, you don't know what the listing agent is going to pay you. However, when you find out, and they send you that, compensation agreement, and you see, oh gee, they're offering, 3%, but my buyer broker agreement's 2.5%. I think, as Kara asked or mentioned, you can modify it. I would tend to agree with Sharon on the retainer. Buyers are not going to give a retainer. I think that's a stretch. You may mention it, see what the reaction is. Well, I think what Stan's asking, I received an email from Stellar MLS last week that my listings are in violation because it mentions compensation, but it's still early and not required yet. Do they want us to remove it now? Again, the only place now you can put the compensation is in those, buyer agent fields, but you can't put it in the public remarks, the realtor remarks. Hey, Shannon. So Shannon's asking, the buyer is paying us, not the seller, since it doesn't go on, I believe it will have to go on the settlement statement. I'll double check that. I mean, you're going to give that buyer broker agreement to the title company, and it needs to go on the settlement statement. You do not want to be trying to get paid outside of closing. You can't do that. I mean, that's just not a good business practice. That needs to be on the settlement statement. That needs to be provided to the title company. Natalie, can the seller still pay both commissions? Yes, I think we've chatted about that. All right, couple more. Where in the agreement does it say that the retainer rolls into the commission? I don't believe that is true, but I'll double check that. Jill Chen. Carlos, if I'm a buyer's agent, how do I go about getting more than 2.5% commission if the listing agent will pay more? By having a modified buyer broker agreement. All right, Michael is asking another question you mentioned in the beginning about the buyer agent has to negotiate with the seller or seller's agent on commission. But what if we never speak with the seller as buyer's agent, or is that traditional barrier broken? Well, I mean, again, think of it like this, Michael. So what you're going to you definitely can't be speaking with the seller, right? I mean, the seller, I mean, where the seller will pay is when they're a FISBO, right? If a seller has retained a listing brokerage to market and sell his property, then they're either offering commission or they're not. And then the listing brokerage will know that. I have to look, Mel. I mean, I did call the legal hotline on your question, how is the processing fee handled? Buyer agreement to state percent plus 399. I believe there is a line. Um, I believe it's 7A, but I'd have to check. But I will get back to you on that. Sylvia is asking, so if I receive a new lead after August 17th and they want a showing, well, since you're in Stellar, Sylvia, the actual date is going to be August 6th. So, and they want a showing, what do I need? Pre-touring, showing, BBA, all three? Before I thought it was just the BBA. Well, the pre-touring property agreement just came out today, so it's a brand new form. So, but you need one of those three. You don't need all three, you just need one of them. I'm a little disappointed in, the Florida Realtors and that they don't have like the showing agreement form out. Like, what are they doing? This has been months. All right, guys, so I'm gonna go through the questions. Um, we'll try to get something up on the website, some frequently asked questions, so that you'll have a resource. Give us a few days to a week on that. I appreciate everybody being here. Thank you so much. I know this is, change is always difficult. Don't be nervous, embrace it, understand it, present your value. If you have questions, call the support line. If they're unable to answer your question, they will refer you on to me and I will help you. All right. Appreciate everyone being here. Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening. Thank you. All right, guys. Have a great night. Enjoy. Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Bye, everybody.